The time has finally come and the Premier League is back in just 1 week from today. I'm still here scrambling to figure out my fantasy Premier League team, but I think it's also right I bless YouTube with arguably what might be the most accurate predictions you will find around. Please do just ignore the predictions I put up on the channel last year. For this year, I figured out the perfect algorithm. I have seen the visions, so I know what is going to happen before it even happens. Am I doing this video before the transfer window closes, meaning that, things might change and all of this might end up being completely wrong? Potentially, but I don't believe so. So with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and let's get into these predictions. So in 20th place and dead last, the team that is going to be a shoo-in to get relegated this season, it's none other than Sunderland. The writing is on the wall for this one, as well as the other teams that I think are going to get relegated. Sunderland did well enough to get through the championship playoffs in pretty dramatic fashion, but I don't see them surviving. It's just going to come down to the fact that similar to the other championship teams that have been coming through in the last couple of seasons, their team is just not good enough. It consists of mostly players that came in through the championship. And again, we've seen these guys just don't really end up translating into the Premier League. Wilson Isidore managed to be good enough to get 12 goals in the championship of Burnley last year, but I highly doubt he's going to be able to replicate that form. And you would assume, yes, they did come in through the playoffs, so they must have some money to spend, right? And granted, they did sign Granit Xhaka, an experienced center defensive midfielder, very good international player for Switzerland. You would assume this guy would be good enough to keep Sunderland in the Premier League, but we've seen this story before. Newly promoted team signs a guy who's been around in the Premier League, hoping that they stay up, and then it just goes completely wrong. Adengera could be good in getting them some goals, but it's yet to be seen if Diarra and the young Belgian league signing can do anything for them. And they did also lose Joe Bellingham, which, of course he's not the finished article, but a player like him, that tenacity, he could have been good enough to get them some more points in moments that they would have needed it, but he's gone. It's going to be tough for them. I think they'll probably come in 20th. And surprise, surprise, coming in at 19th, we have another promoted team in Burnley. In my opinion, they're bound to do a little bit better than Sunderland. The reason being is that they went back to being more defensive after the disaster experiment that was Vincent Kompany. Last season in the championship, they only conceded 16 goals in 46 matches. I don't care what you say, that is incredible no matter what league it is done in. 16 goals in 42 games is insane, but I highly doubt they're going to be able to replicate that. I mean, we're talking about championship level opponents against the Premier League. It's just not going to be sustainable. Being in that tougher league is just going to kill them. They did also lose James Trafford, which is going to be a big loss when it comes to not conceding goals. And another kiss of death for these newly promoted teams is that they've signed way too many new players. Loum Tushana, Bashir Humphries, Marcus Edward, Jaden Anthony, Zion Fleming, Kondashi Hartman, Jacob Larson, Max Weiss, Twanzebe, Kyle Walker. And some decent names in there like Marcus Edwards, Jaden Anthony, a washed Kyle Walker, Twanzebe, but are these guys really going to be enough for them to stay up? Are they all going to gel into the team with enough time to help them stay up? I don't think so. Their defensive style play is going to probably help them win more points than Sunderland, but I just don't see them really doing anything this year. And to cap off the teams that I think are going to get relegated, we have again newly promoted side Leeds. I really wanted to give one of the newly promoted teams the benefit of the doubt like I did last year and kind of assume that maybe, just maybe, one of them will be good enough to stay in the league, but I just do not see that happening. In contrast to Burnley, Leeds were a side in the championship that were attacking with some venom. They would score 96 goals in the season, which again is impressive no matter what. Joel Pirot and Daniel James were massive pieces in that attacking force. And even then, they were still good defensively, only conceding 30 goals. And they have made good signings in Biol, Sean Longstaff, and Stock, but they lost Junior Firpo and Christensen, who were important players in the back. Teams that come up to the Premier League that end up trying to play attacking and fluid football that got them really good results in the championship end up crashing and burning. We've seen it recently with Ipswich, with Luton, and really Leeds is probably just going to follow suit. The reality check of trying that in the Premier League just hits them like a bag of bricks. I'm sorry, Leeds, but I just do not see it happening for you guys. If they prove me wrong, they prove me wrong, but I think it's just going to end up being those newly promoted teams that go straight back down. So now that begs the question, what are the three teams that I think are going to be just about fighting to survive relegation? I hope this year the relegation battle isn't as much of a wash as it was last season, but the last these like three teams are probably going to be within that conversation. So with that just about about surviving relegation in 17th place, I have Wolves. And by how much they survive, like I said, kind of depends on the quality of the other teams. But realistically, I think Wolves are just going to get rocked by those major departures. Cunha and Ryan Aït-Nouri were the heartbeat of Wolves last season, and they're both gone. They have brought in Jon Arias, who had a good Club World Cup, and for Lopez, but will that really be enough to fill in Cunha's shoes? They'll still have enough quality to survive in the Premier League, but I don't think this season will be too good for them as a whole. They mainly played off that left-hand side of Cunha and Aït-Nouri last season, and it's going to be difficult to adapt to that many changes. Mind you, this Wolves team conceded the most goals in the league when not accounting for the relegated sides, which goes to show how it's just not going to get any easier. Strand Larson really needs to step it up this year, and if he does not, then Wolves is going to be in trouble. In 16th place, I have West Ham. So West Ham recently have had a tendency to have one bad season, and then following it up with a decent season where they go up a few positions in the table. But I don't think that's going to be happening this time around. Last year, West Ham had the benefit of having historically bad Man United and Spurs sides underneath them. I don't see that happening again, which means if they don't improve, they'll find themselves lower. Potter is still at the helm, and although their preseason has been decent, who knows if they'll manage to be consistent during the actual season. They have lost Kudus this summer, who was damn near non-existent in the 24-25 season, but was big for them in the past. The additions of Diouf and Callum Wilson are decent, but are they really improving the squad much more than what they were at last year? I don't know, I just don't see West Ham pushing themselves any further than they really were last season. I guess maybe getting rid of Mikel Antonio might actually lift the spirits at the club since they've been trying to replace him for such a long time now, but again, I really just do not see West Ham getting too much better. And rounding off the teams that might be fighting that danger of getting relegated, I have Brentford at 15. Brentford last season were a side that were fun to watch for a few reasons. And Mbeumo and Visa were nasty up top, Thomas Frank's system was competitive against the top teams, Damsgaard was a creative machine, and Norgard was a linchpin for that defensive structure. Well, Mbeumo, Thomas Frank, and Norgard are all gone, and Visa might go as well. So there's just a huge identity shift in Brentford, and this is probably just going to lead to a lot of cracks in the team. Thomas Frank had instilled a very specific system for this team, but now that former set-piece coach Keith Andrews will be tasked with keeping the level of the team the same, how are things even going to go for these guys? He's going to have to work without one and potentially two of their star forwards, their former club captain being gone, and their reliable keeper being gone. They have brought in Kelleher to replace Fleck. However, we're unsure if the new arrival of Antonio Milambo will be enough to replace Mbeumo's output. This much instability really is probably going to see them drop a couple places from where they were at before. It's going to be very hard for this new manager to replicate Thomas Frank's style of play, if that's even the route he wants to go, especially without all these guys that made it work. So now we're getting into the brunt of those just kind of mid-table, lower mid-table teams that are just going to kind of be here this season. So with that, in 14th, we have Everton. Everton is kind of in a state of limbo at the moment. They kind of represents this part of the table. They're not good enough to start pushing into the top half of the table or to make a shock run in the European spot. I don't think they're necessarily bad enough to be in contention for relegation. Last year, once Moyes came in, he did steady the ship a ton and had them playing a lot better than they were under Sean Dyche, but the squad as a whole doesn't really scream out the idea of contending. The new arrivals of Tierno Berry and Alcaraz have been decent in preseason and could potentially add to the attack for the Toffees, but Berry's going to have to get used to the Premier League, and Alcaraz still has to prove his worth as well. I do see them dropping off a little bit from last year, considering the fact that that new manager bounce is going to be completely worn off by some point this season. So moving into 13th place, now we have Fulham. At the time of this recording, Fulham have not made any notable transfers in or out of the club. In the same breath, Marco Silva is still the manager at the helm. So kind of the opposite of Brentford, who have seen too many changes happening in the offseason. Fulham probably hasn't made enough changes to kind of level up a little bit, and I can't help but feel like this is going to cause them to stagnate. Last season, they would go on some good runs that saw Raul Jimenez recapture his best form, Adama Traore finally put in some consistent performances, and Jedi Robinson become one of the best left backs in the league. But at the same time, there were periods where the squad just looked fatigued and just like that little bit to go the extra mile. In my opinion, this stagnation and lack of change doesn't really convince me that they'll improve on their 11th place finish, and I could see them dropping down just a little bit again, especially considering the teams around them might improve. So now in 12th place, I'm going to have Crystal Palace. Funny enough, I have them finishing in the exact same position that they finished last season. Last year, everyone expected them to get off to a flying start, but they would end up going on a bad run to begin the season before Glasner managed to turn things around halfway through. And I can see something similar happening again this season. And there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, there's all this contention to what's going on with their European spot. They did win the FA Cup, which meant they should have been in the Europa League, but then there's these issues with their ownership, so they got dropped down into the Conference League, and this is the decision they're just still trying to appeal. And this is bound to have an effect on them mentally, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to end up pushing on from that. But regardless, they're now going to have to balance a European competition on top top of the Premier League and other competitions. And this is with a squad that's mostly the same from last season, bar the arrival of Benitez and Borna Sosa. Can this team really balance a European competition and also trying to improve in the Premier League from their position last year? I don't know if they can. Secondly, what's really going to impact the season is the fact that we don't really know what's going to happen with Eze. Should he stay, then he'll be pivotal in any success that they have this season, and he could even help them finish just a little bit higher in the league. But if he leaves, then there's a chance they finish maybe lower than 12th. In my opinion, 12th is a pretty safe position for them whether Eze leaves or not. I have a feeling if it does go, Mateta and Sarr, they're going to have to step up a lot, and they could probably help them finish 12th. But even if it does stay, then it kind of goes back to the things of having to balance all these other competitions. So it's all in the air for them, but you can imagine 12th is safe for Crystal Palace this season. And 11th, I'm going to have Bournemouth. So you might be asking yourself, they had a good season last year, why do you have them dropping down a couple places? Well, in my opinion, I don't think they have the element of surprising you. Last year, they took the league by storm, and Iriola's system had everyone scrambling, but their tricks are going to be expected this season. It kind of happens often where you have a team that maybe a new manager comes in and then they take the league by storm, make these crazy runs, surprise everyone, get these great results, but then the following season, they kind of tail off a little bit because, like I said, everyone's expecting it. On top of that, they've had some major departures. Milos Kerkez, Dean Huijsen, and Kepa have all left the club. At least Kerkez and Huijsen were major parts of that defensive structure. Kerkez was a beast at bombing forward and making things happen in the attack as well. These are two big pieces to lose. They have brought in Truffet as a left back replacement, but we don't know if he's going to be good enough. And on top of that, just goes back to the question of, are they going to be able to keep up that same form? Last year, Ivan Ilson, Kluivert, and Semenyo were all very good, but there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to perform the same way that they did last year. I think it's just going to be one of those cases of diminishing returns for Bournemouth. And speaking of diminishing returns, that takes us to 10th place where I have Nottingham Forest. Of course, last year, most people either had them getting relegated or 17th, 16th in the league, and they would go on to shock everybody by finishing top half, almost finishing in Europe, and just smacking a lot of the top teams in the league. But again, diminishing returns. I just don't know if they'll be capable of maintaining that high level of performance that they had last year, especially with some teams potentially improving. Chris Wood was very efficient last season, but again, what's the guarantee that he's going to maintain that level? What happens if there's a fatigue of Nuno's tactics, and this starts to affect the squad, and all of a sudden absorbing so much pressure doesn't go so well? Notably, one of their best players in Anthony Elanga did depart the club as well, so will that cause Forest's attack to dwindle? Igor Jesus and Ndoye are good pickups, so if they can get firing, then there's hope for Forest to potentially finish a little bit higher, but I just can't help but feel like that magic spark that got them over the line last year won't be the same. They'll probably still be pretty good defensively, but I do see just a drop off in the goal scoring department for them, causing them to kind of go down a couple places. So now creeping into those kind of top half of the table teams, we have Brighton. Brighton, of course, this season have directly fed Chelsea one of their best assets again by selling them João Pedro. João managed to perform very well in a somewhat inconsistent Brighton last year, but now he's gone. Welbeck, Ruder, and new arrival and Karolampos Pustolas will have to pick up some of that load, but with the key piece of the attack being gone, I do see them regressing just a little bit. They still have powerhouse midfielder Baleba, who will probably have a breakout season this year because Brighton just have to have a breakout star every single year. Very reliable this year, they'll probably get some good results here and there, go on some good runs, but 9th place. So there's a couple of teams that are still remaining, some teams that did really crazily bad last season, so we're gonna get into those teams now. At 8th place, I have Spurs. So look, Spurs is deadass just coming off one of their worst seasons in recent history, maybe history all time. They probably would have been relegated if, circumstances were different, but at the end of the day, they also won the Europa League. So with that, things needed to change at the club. Ange would be sacked, and in his way came in Thomas Frank from Brentford. There hasn't been too many notable exits from the player standpoint, but there have been some good incoming. Kudus, Paulinho, and Danto have all joined the club, which are going to bring a lot of talent into the team. Kudus and Danto have been impressing in preseason, and Paulinho was one of the best center defensive midfielders in the league during his time at Fulham, but he just kind of didn't work out at Bayern specific. These players with the guys that they already have like Madison, Solanke, Kulusevski, Sarr, all are going to be playing under Thomas Frank, who's probably going to bring a better system than Ange did, so it's kind of exciting for Spurs fans to see. I do not see them doing as bad as they did last year. There is just no way. There is no way they do as bad as they did last year. But I still don't see them kind of breaking into those top positions, battling for top 5, top 6. Defensive depth could still be a major problem, and really kind of just depth as a whole. Son is also gone now, so who are they going to get to replace him? He wasn't really great last season, expensive, but still could have been a great asset. And really, at the end of the day, there's probably just going to be a lot of teams that are still better than Spurs. And on top of that, they have Champions League football to balance. So I think 8th place is a little more realistic for them. So we talked about Tweedledee. It's time to talk about Tweedledum. At 7th place, I have United. We are also coming off a historically bad season. I have to be realistic, and really 7th and 8th for these two teams is really probably the safest way to go. So what positives is United coming into the season with? We have had more time under Ruben Amorim this offseason, so that has led to a decent preseason where we're actually seeing somewhat good patterns of play. And last season we couldn't score goals, but Mbeumo and Konya are here. So what negatives are we coming in with? We're still struggling to consistently build up. Our midfield is terrible, and I absolutely despise Ugarte, and I think I'm not the only one. So there's just so many things that are going on at this club. I do think, like I said, we're bound to do a lot better. I would love for the expectation to be for us to get back into the top 4. I would kill anyone for that. But if I had to just be realistic, I don't want to look like an idiot come the end of the season. So I think 7th place is probably just more real. There's so much going on at the moment. Even if we're only playing one game a season, 7th place. So in all the locked in European league spots, in 6th place, I have Newcastle. Newcastle have become a very good side, and it showed when they came 5th place last season. Bruno Guimaraes, Joelinton, and Tonali are easily one of the toughest midfields to go up against. Defensively, they have man mountains, and Isak became arguably the best striker in the league. I can see many of these things staying the same this season, and the addition of Elanga to the attack will help it become even more fighting. However, is Isak even going to be motivated to be at that same level as last year? There's a lot of drama going on with Isak. He demanded a transfer request. It doesn't really look like he's leaving because the club kind of priced him out, but rightfully so. I mean, 150 million for Isak is about right, really. So what's his attitude going to be at the club if he stays it? Is he going to barely feature for the club? Is he going to play very half-assed? Will he be on a rampage and just go beast mode against every other team? We don't know. I would expect it to be the latter, so he gets even more interest and really can force a move out the club, but we still don't know. He could still leave after this video goes up. We'll have to wait and see. I expect him to stay, but we really don't know what's going to happen. On top of that, these guys are back in the Champions League, and we saw before how much that affected them in the league, and the same thing could happen again. Injuries start coming. If players aren't doing well enough, it's going to be hard to balance all these things at once, and they could drop down just a little bit, which is what I think is going to happen. So meaning at 5th place, I have a reversal of last season, and I have Aston Villa. Villa will have the benefit of not having the Champions League to worry about specifically. They still have the Europa League, but this will probably help them in the league a little bit, since they'll probably feel like there's less pressure. In my opinion, the squad is still very similar to last season, but as a whole, it still consists of many players who could develop on their form from last season. Rodgers, Madsen, Konsa, Onana, Malen, Brandsey. These are all guys who could continue to get better and thus help Villa improve from last season. If they can keep a good focus on the league and see their stars rise, then they'll have a team led by Unai Emery that could comfortably finish in that 5th place spot. So now, 4 teams left. Everyone at this point, I'm sure, knows what those 4 teams are. So who do I have as pretty much the 3 runners up, and then who do I have winning the league? I do think the top of the league is going to be a little bit closer than it was last season, because the kind of overall quality of all of these guys has improved. And 4th place, I'm going to take a little bit of risk here. I think Man City is going to finish in 4th. Now hear me out. Yes, they still have Pep Guardiola. Yes, they still have Erling Haaland. And yes, they have gone on and signed Ryan Shirky, Tijani Reinders, and Ait Nouri at the back. But as a whole, it's kind of just giving too many new toys. Yes, these are all great players, but what's really the likelihood that they all gel perfectly within the first 10, 11, 12 games of the season and City go on this insane run? There's a chance even at the back where maybe they don't have enough depth still, that if injuries happen, maybe they fall off a little. Phil Foden, what's going to happen with that guy? He had a terrible season last year when he was coming off the PFA Player of the Year. Is he going to show up this season? In my opinion, the team that I have 3rd and the 2nd and 1st as well, they've gone up a level from last year in terms of signings, in terms of what we're seeing on the pitch. City, it's just too much of a question mark. There's a chance Haaland really does kick up a notch this season, but everything else at the club just kind of feels like it's in the air. So for that reason, I have them 4th, which means in 3rd place, I have Chelsea. The Club World Cup winners have pretty much gone and signed almost everyone under the sun. I'm pretty sure I saw an email from Chelsea Football Club in my inbox asking me to sign for them, but I had to deny it. We saw in the Club World Cup, even though their run wasn't the hardest in the world, what Maresca's cooking up this year. He approached every game with a different tactical setup, which had different players in different roles, as he kind of tweaks to find what's going to be the best options for him. As I kind of mentioned earlier, they did sign João Pedro from Brighton, who has been a massive addition. On top of that, they do also have Liam Delap now as a good backup option, as well as Jackson if they really need to use it. Overall, Chelsea is just kind of growing into this bigger role into the club, and they also have the benefit of having 1,000 players to choose from for the cup competitions, which means depth really isn't much of an issue. Their only really kind of drawback could be that keeper position, as they did let Petrovic go. Sanchez isn't really the most reliable keeper in the world, so we do kind of have to put an asterisk next to them because we've seen what a bad goalkeeper can kind of result in. But I think Chelsea this year are just gonna kick it up a notch. Palmer's finally gonna hit a really good consistent form like he did when he had that breakout year, and I do think they'll finish above Man City this year. So that's it. Last two spots. Who do I have coming as runner-up? So surprise, surprise, I have Arsenal, which means, of course, that means I have Liverpool winning the league. And I'm not doing this out of spite because I think that, you know, Arsenal are gonna bottle it and they suck and they're just not good enough and stuff like that. I just think Liverpool is gonna go up another level this season, and it's just going to be hard for Arsenal to dethrone them. Again, not because Arsenal is the worst team in the world, but I think it's just a question of Liverpool being better. So Arsenal, of course, one of their biggest drawbacks over these last couple of years is the fact that they don't have a striker. So they went and signed one of the best strikers in the market in Gyökeres. There's a lot of talk on if he's really going to translate into the Premier League. I think he's going to do well enough to get, 20 plus goals maybe this season. He does seem like a very clinical finisher. It does depend on if Arteta does change the system a little bit to suit him. Gyökeres is going to take a little bit to kind of get up to the speed of the Premier League. I think we've kind of seen that with the preseason games. He hasn't had a full preseason himself, so he's kind of still catching up. So that means first couple games might be a little bit tough for him. But once he does get firing, I think he's really going to have Arsenal at a different level. There's still questions about the left wing position where Madueke can, maybe fill in a role there. He's not the best on the left, but sharing minutes with Martinelli might not be too much of a bad thing. They did bring in Zubimendi, which is going to help the midfield. It doesn't really take it up too many levels, but still a help. I don't know, man. I just think that attack is looking very, very sharp. It's just the fact that Liverpool look crazy this year. With Liverpool, of course, they have signed Wirtz, Kirkes, Frimpong, and Etikite. Of course, there's talk on if this is all going to translate into winning football and if they can make it happen consistently in the Premier League. And in my opinion, I think it's all going to work out, to be honest with you. I think Wirtz is just a player that can translate into anywhere he goes. I think Frimpong has that understanding with Wirtz, and that's going to help both of them kind of transition into the team. Kirkes is already Premier League proven, and Etikite cannot be any worse than Darwin Núñez, and they won the league with Darwin Núñez. So really, it's how much is that really going to affect them? In the same breath, now Salah has less responsibility, which means other players are going to be occupied, which is going to give Salah more space. I think if these guys are just going to boss up another level. Did they lose Luis Diaz? Yes, I do not think they care. They did also lose a backup option in Quans at the back, so they do kind of have to sign someone there in case something happens. But in my opinion, I think it's just going to be one of those seasons where it's going to be close. Hopefully it's very close, but I think Liverpool is just going to be on a tear this season. And yes, I hate to say it because I have United finishing 7th and Arsenal, Liverpool, and City in the top 4, but it is what it is. Gotta be real. But with that being said, boys, that is my final take on the Premier League predictions. I think I nailed it 100%. If you ask me, I don't think there's any room for improvement. I think this is definitely the best that you're going to see out there. But hey, you let me know what you think in the comments below.